Story number 1. Alfred Packer, Echoes of the Forsaken. I've always been drawn to the stories that linger in the shadows of history, tales that blur the line between survival and savagery. The story of Alfred Packer, a man whose name became synonymous with desperation and darkness, has haunted me for years. As a freelance writer with a fascination for true crime and the macabre, I decided to delve deeper into the chilling events of 1874, when Packer and his expedition met a fate that would echo through the annals of American folklore. It was a bitterly cold January when I arrived in Durango, Colorado, the closest town to the infamous San Juan Mountains. The winter air was sharp, biting through my coat as I navigated the narrow streets lined with wooden storefronts and shuttered windows. Locals eyed me warily, their gazes lingering on the stack of papers I carried research notes for my latest project on Alfred Packer, the man who became America's first documented cannibal. My journey began at the Durango Public Library, a quaint building that stood as a repository of forgotten memories and untold stories. I spent hours poring over old newspapers, diaries, and official records, piecing together the fragmented accounts of Packer's ill-fated expedition. According to historical documents, Packer had led a group of 8 men through the treacherous terrain of the San Juan Mountains in search of gold. What was meant to be a lucrative venture quickly devolved into a nightmare of starvation, fear, and unimaginable horror. As I delved deeper into the accounts, the lines between fact and folklore began to blur. Survivors described nights filled with eerie sounds, whispers carried by the wind, footsteps echoing through the darkness, and the incessant howling of wolves that seemed to be mere shadows of their true predators. The mountain itself felt alive, a sentient entity watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as dusk settled over Durango, I decided to take a solitary hike into the foothills, hoping to connect more intimately with the landscape that had claimed so many lives. The path was rugged, winding through dense pine forests and rocky outcrops that offered little shelter from the encroaching cold. The further I trekked, the more I felt an oppressive weight pressing down on me, as if the very air was thick with the anguish of those who had perished before me. Nightfall came swiftly, draping the mountains in darkness. I set up camp near a small clearing, the remnants of a makeshift fire pit hinting at the desperate attempts of Packer and his men to stave off the cold. As I sat by the dying embers, the silence was shattered by the distant sound of twigs snapping under heavy footsteps. My heart raced as I strained to listen, trying to discern friend from foe. Out of the darkness emerged a solitary figure, cloaked in tattered clothing that seemed to blend seamlessly with the night. It was Alfred Packer himself, or rather, the apparition of him that locals whispered about, a ghost doomed to wander the mountains forever. His eyes, hollow and sunken, bore into mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Why do you disturb our rest?" his voice echoed, a spectral whisper that seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath my feet. I swallowed hard, mustering the courage to respond. "I seek to understand your story, to honor the memory of those who suffered." Packer's ghostly form flickered, the edges of his body wavering like smoke in the wind. Understand? We were left to the mercy of these mountains, abandoned by those who should have protected us. Hunger became our tormentor, and desperation our downfall. As he spoke, the temperature around me plummeted, my breath visible in the frigid air. The shadows around the clearing seemed to deepen, twisting into grotesque shapes that danced on the edge of my vision. The howling of wolves grew louder, their cries now unmistakably sinister, as if mocking our futile attempts at survival. "Survival," Packer repeated, his voice tinged with bitterness. "What is survival when humanity is stripped away, leaving only the primal instinct to live?" We became monsters, driven by the darkness within and without. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the remaining embers of my fire and plunging me into darkness. Panic surged through me as the oppressive silence was broken by the sound of tearing flesh and guttural screams. Memories, perhaps, of the atrocities committed in the name of survival. My mind raced to make sense of the sensory onslaught. Each sound a harrowing reminder of the thin veneer that separates civilization from savagery. "Release us," Packer's voice pleaded, the anguish in his tone palpable. "Remember us, not as monsters, but as men broken by the unforgiving hands of fate." I reached out instinctively, my hand passing through his ethereal form. "I will tell your story," I vowed. "I will make sure the world knows the truth of what happened." A moment of silence followed, the weight of my promise hanging heavy in the air. Packer's ghost began to fade, his form dissolving into the misty night. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a profound sense of sorrow and unspoken gratitude. As dawn broke over the mountains, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the remnants of the night's terrors. I packed up my camp, the experience leaving an indelible mark on my soul. The story of Alfred Packer and his ill-fated expedition was no longer just a dark chapter in history. It was a testament to the fragility of humanity and the haunting echoes of desperation that linger long after the physical wounds have healed. Back in Durango, I compiled my findings, weaving together the historical accounts with my personal encounter in the mountains. The resulting narrative was both a tribute and a warning, a reflection on the thin line that separates survival from monstrosity. As I published the story, the response was immediate and intense. Readers were captivated by the blend of factual history and supernatural elements, the tale resonating with a primal fear that still haunts the human psyche. Months later, I received a letter from a distant relative of one of Packer's lost companions. They shared stories passed down through generations, accounts of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena that continued to plague the remnants of the San Juan Mountains. It was a reminder that some stories never truly end, that the echoes of the past can still reach out to the present in the most unexpected and terrifying ways. One night, as I sat alone in my study, the wind howling outside like the restless spirits of the mountains, I felt a presence, a lingering sorrow that seemed to seep through the walls. The room grew cold, my breath visible in the frigid air, and the sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the silence. "Remember us?" The whisper reverberated in my mind, a haunting plea that transcended time and space. "Honor our memory." I closed my eyes, the weight of the promise I had made pressing down on me. In that moment, I understood that the story of Alfred Packer was more than just a tale of survival and desperation. It was a lesson in humanity, a reminder of the darkness that can consume us when we are pushed to our limits. As winter once again blanketed the San Juan Mountains, I found myself drawn back to the very place where Packer's story began. Armed with renewed determination, I ventured into the wilderness, seeking to pay homage to the men who had been lost and to ensure that their stories would never be forgotten. The mountains stood silent, their peaks shrouded in snow, yet the echoes of the past whispered through the winds, a constant reminder of the thin line between civilization and the primal instincts that lie dormant within us all. In honoring the memory of Alfred Packer and his lost companions, I've come to understand that some stories are not just to be told, but to be remembered. Their voices may have been silenced by death, but their echoes continue to resonate, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can dwell within the human soul and the enduring quest for redemption and understanding. Story number 2. The Haunting of Annalise. I've always been skeptical of the supernatural. Ghost stories, exorcisms, and tales of possession were mere fabrications to entertain gullible minds, or so I believed. That was until I encountered the tragic story of Annalise Michel, a young woman whose life unraveled in the most horrifying way imaginable. As a journalist specializing in true crime and unexplained phenomena, I sought the truth behind her harrowing experiences, unaware that my pursuit would lead me into the darkest corners of human suffering and spiritual torment. It was late autumn when I first heard about Annalise. A friend in Munich mentioned her case over coffee, sharing how her relentless exorcism trials had culminated in her untimely death. Intrigued by the details, I decided to delve deeper, convinced that there had to be a logical explanation behind the chaos that enveloped her life. Annalise Michel was a devout Catholic, her faith a cornerstone of her existence. Born in 1952, she was a bright and promising young woman with dreams of becoming a teacher. However, her life took a sinister turn in the early 1970s when she began exhibiting disturbing behavior. Friends and family described her as increasingly irritable, aggressive, and withdrawn. First, her symptoms were dismissed as a mental health crisis, but as they worsened, the situation became unbearable. Her parents, devout Catholics themselves, sought help from both medical professionals and clergy. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy and suggestive psychosis, prescribing medication and therapy. Yet, nothing seemed to alleviate her suffering. Her episodes became more severe, marked by seizures, violent outbursts, and terrifying visions. It was then that the notion of demonic possession began to take root in her community. The idea of possession was met with skepticism by the medical community. But Annalise's parents were unwavering in their belief. They turned to the church, seeking an exorcism to save their daughter's soul. What followed was a grueling 12-month battle between faith and science, a clash that left everyone involved physically and emotionally drained. I traveled to Germany to interview those who had been close to Annalise, the priest who conducted the exorcisms. Father Ernst Alt spoke of the relentless efforts to free her from what he believed was a malevolent force. She was tormented beyond imagination, he confessed, his voice heavy with sorrow. We tried everything within our faith to help her. Annalise's condition deteriorated rapidly. The exorcisms were exhaustive, involving sleepless nights, intense prayers, and rituals meant to expel the demons that had taken hold of her. Witnesses described her convulsing violently, speaking in tongues, and exhibiting supernatural strength. It was as if something or someone was controlling her actions, refusing to let her return to a semblance of normalcy. Despite the tireless efforts of the church and her family, Annalise's health continued to decline. She became emaciated, her body ravaged by malnutrition and dehydration. The psychological toll was evident. Her once vibrant spirit was now a shadow of its former self. Friends who visited her spoke of an oppressive atmosphere, an unexplainable heaviness that seemed to emanate from her very being. As I pieced together the timeline of events, I couldn't help but notice the parallels between Annalise's story and countless other tales of possession and exorcism. The line between mental illness and supernatural influence seemed increasingly blurred. Was Annalise truly possessed? Or was her suffering the result of untreated psychological trauma? Determined to uncover the truth, I sought out medical records and testimonies from those who had treated her. The doctors who once diagnosed her described her as a patient with severe epilepsy and psychosis, whose symptoms escalated despite their best efforts. Yet, the exorcism reports painted a picture of a young woman battling unseen forces, her spirit under siege by darkness beyond human comprehension. One night, as I sat alone in my study, surrounded by notes and photographs of Annalise, a chill ran down my spine. The room grew inexplicably cold, and the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I dismissed it as a power surge, but the feeling of being watched lingered. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was an unknown number, and I hesitated before answering. Annalise, a whispery voice breathed through the line, sending shivers down my spine. Help me. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. Was it a prank? A hallucination brought on by sleepless nights of research? Or was it something more sinister? A lingering presence of the torment Annalise had endured? Unable to shake the feeling that something was drawing me deeper into Annalise's story, I decided to visit the places that had been significant in her final months. The small apartment she shared with her parents became my first destination. The building stood silent, its windows dark and unwelcoming. As I stepped inside, memories of her suffering seemed to echo through the empty halls. In her room, I found remnants of her life before the darkness took hold. Photos of a smiling Annalise, books she loved, and the medication that had become a constant presence. The air was thick with the weight of her anguish, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Why didn't anyone save her? I whispered to the empty room, determined to honor her memory. I reached out to Father Alt once more. During our conversation, he revealed the extent of the emotional and spiritual toll the exorcisms had taken on him and his congregation. We tried to save her, but sometimes faith isn't enough, he admitted, his eyes reflecting a profound sense of loss. As I continued my investigation, the lines between reality and the supernatural began to blur. I experienced unexplainable phenomena, objects moving on their own, disembodied whispers, and visions of a young woman in pain. It was as if Annalise's spirit was reaching out, desperate to be heard and understood. One evening, driven by a mix of fear and empathy, I returned to her apartment to spend the night, hoping to communicate directly with her spirit. Armed with a voice recorder and a Ouija board, I sat alone in her room, the air heavy with anticipation. "Annalise," I called out softly, placing my hands on the planchette. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the planchette began to move slowly across the board, spelling out words that sent chills down my spine. "Help," it spelled. "Peace." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the depth of her suffering. Annalise wasn't just a victim of circumstance or misdiagnosis. She was a soul trapped in torment, yearning for release. The weight of her pain was palpable, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human spirit. Determined to give her the peace she so desperately sought, I collaborated with spiritual leaders and mental health professionals to create a comprehensive account of her story. Our goal was to bridge the gap between faith and science, offering a path toward understanding and healing for those affected by similar tragedies. The process was arduous, filled with moments of doubt and fear, yet, as we delved deeper, a sense of purpose guided us. Annalise's story was more than just a case study. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for truth and justice. One night, as we concluded our final session, a profound sense of calm settled over the room. The oppressive energy that had plagued us for so long seemed to dissipate, replaced by a serene stillness. It was as if Annalise's spirit had finally found the peace it had been denied, her suffering acknowledged and her memory honored. In the weeks that followed, our comprehensive account of Annalise Michel's tragic journey gained recognition, sparking conversations about the intersection of faith, mental health, and the supernatural. Her story served as a poignant reminder of the importance of compassion, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of truth. As I reflect on my journey, I realize that Annalise's story transcends the boundaries of conventional explanations. It lies at the intersection of human suffering and the inexplicable forces that sometimes seek to bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual. Her legacy is a beacon of hope, illuminating the path toward healing and redemption for those who have been forgotten by time and society. Every time I hear a whisper in the night or feel a chill in the air, I'm reminded of Annalise Michel and the enduring power of her spirit. Her story is not just one of tragedy but also of resilience and the unyielding quest for peace. And as long as there are those willing to listen, the echoes of her suffering will continue to resonate, ensuring that her memory and the lessons she imparts are never forgotten. In honoring Annalise's memory, I've come to understand that true horror lies not just in the supernatural, but in the unresolved pain and injustices that linger long after the physical world has moved on. Her story teaches us the importance of empathy, the need to bridge gaps between faith and reason, and the enduring power of the human spirit to seek justice and find peace amidst the darkest of circumstances. As winter blankets the world in silence, I often find myself revisiting Annalise's story, the whispers of her past guiding me toward a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between life and death, faith and science, suffering and redemption. Her legacy is a haunting reminder that every soul deserves to be heard, Every story deserves to be told, and every spirit deserves to find its way home. Story number 3. Annabelle, the Haunting Doll. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural, drawn to stories that blur the line between reality and the unknown. When I first heard about Annabelle, the infamous haunted doll housed at the Warrens Occult Museum, my curiosity was instantly ignited. As a freelance journalist specializing in paranormal phenomena, I knew this was a story I couldn't pass up. Little did I know, delving into Annabelle's history would pull me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. It was a chilly October evening in 2023 when I received the invitation. A sleek black envelope, its edges perfectly straight, arrived at my doorstep with no return address. Inside was a simple card. You are cordially invited to an exclusive tour of the Warren Occult Museum. Witness the legends firsthand. My heart raced with excitement and apprehension. The Warrens, renowned paranormal investigators, had amassed a collection of some of the most haunted objects in existence. Annabelle was the crown jewel, a raggedy and doll with a sinister reputation. I arrived at the museum just as dusk began to settle, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. The building itself was unassuming, nestled between modern storefronts in a quiet corner of Los Angeles. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and faint traces of incense. The interior was dimly lit, each room meticulously arranged to showcase the eerie artifacts collected over decades. Ed and Lorraine Warren greeted me warmly, their presence exuding a sense of calm authority. "Welcome," Ed said, his deep voice resonating through the room. Lorraine's piercing blue eyes seemed to see right through me, assessing my intentions. "We're glad you could join us." We made our way through the museum, each exhibit more chilling than the last. Objects that had witnessed unspeakable horrors were carefully displayed, each accompanied by detailed descriptions of their dark histories. Finally, we reached the room where Annabelle resided. The doll sat atop a glass case, her button eyes staring blankly ahead, a stark contrast to the vibrant red dress she wore. Despite her innocent appearance, an undeniable aura of malevolence surrounded her. "Annabelle has a particularly tragic and violent history," Lorraine began, her voice soft yet filled with emotion. "She was given to a young nurse named Donna in the 1970s. Shortly after receiving the doll, Donna and her roommate experienced a series of terrifying events: strange noises, moving objects, and a pervasive sense of dread. It wasn't long before Donna sought our help." It continued. "Through our investigations, we discovered that Annabelle was not just a toy. She was possessed by the spirit of a deceased girl named Annabelle Higgins. Her spirit was restless, unable to move on due to unresolved trauma from her past life." As Lorraine spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that Annabelle's eyes were following my every move. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening as night fully embraced the museum. I felt an inexplicable pull towards the doll, a mixture of fear and fascination that rooted me to the spot. Despite our efforts to contain her, Annabelle remains one of the most dangerous spirits we've encountered. Ed warned. "She has a will of her own and can manipulate her surroundings to instill fear and chaos." Determined to understand the extent of Annabelle's power, I requested a closer look. Lorraine hesitated, her eyes clouded with concern, but eventually nodded. "Be cautious. Annabelle is not to be underestimated." I approached the glass case, my reflection merging with Annabelle's in the glass. As I leaned in, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. My breath became visible, frosting in the frigid air. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room was plunged into darkness for a heartbeat before returning to their dim glow. A soft giggle echoed through the space, followed by a whisper so faint it bordered on inaudible. "Hello?" The voice seemed to emanate from the doll itself. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared into Annabelle's lifeless eyes, now gleaming with an unsettling intensity. I tried to steady my nerves, focusing on Lorraine's composed demeanor beside me. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Before Lorraine could respond, the room began to shift. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsating with a dark energy that pressed against my senses. The shadows around us deepened, coalescing into ghostly forms that floated and twisted in the air. The soft whispers grew louder, morphing into agonized cries that reverberated through the room. Annabelle's glass case began to shake violently, the doll rattling against the protective barrier. I felt an invisible force tugging at my arm, pulling me closer to the case. My mind raced, searching for a way to break free from the oppressive grip. Desperate, I reached out to touch the glass, hoping to communicate with the spirit within. "Annabelle, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of supernatural sounds. "What do you need?" The room grew colder still, the air thick with sorrow and rage. Annabelle's eyes seemed to darken, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile reminiscent of the infamous Glasgow smile. The whispers coalesced into a single, anguished plea. "Release me." Suddenly, the force that held me back intensified, pulling me towards the doll with an unrelenting power. I struggled, every muscle straining against the invisible chains that bound me. Lorraine and Ed moved to intervene, but the shadows barred their path, their attempts to reach me thwarted by the malevolent energy surrounding Annabelle. Panic surged through me as I felt myself being dragged closer to the glass. Just as I was about to break free, a surge of determination took hold. I focused all my willpower on resisting the pull, refusing to succumb to the dark force. With a final, desperate effort, I shattered the illusion of being pulled forward, breaking the spell that held me captive. The room erupted in chaos as the shadows dissipated, the oppressive energy lifting like a heavy fog. Annabelle's glass case fell silent, the doll once again sitting motionless atop her pedestal. My heart pounded in my ears, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Lorraine and Ed quickly helped me to my feet, their expressions a mix of relief and concern. "That was close," Ed said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Annabelle is powerful, but understanding her history is key to helping her find peace." As we sat together in the now quiet room, I couldn't shake the lingering presence of Annabelle. Her eyes seemed to watch me, a silent reminder of the darkness that still resided within her. I knew that my encounter was just the beginning, that there was much more to uncover about the spirit that haunted the doll. Determined to honor Annabelle's memory and help her find peace, I delved deeper into her past. Through interviews with the Warren family and extensive research, I uncovered the heartbreaking story of Annabelle Higgins, a young girl whose life was cut short by tragedy and whose spirit was bound to the doll she cherished in life. Annabelle had been a bright, vivacious child with dreams of becoming an artist. Her life was filled with love and creativity until a series of unfortunate events led to her untimely death. Betrayed by those she trusted, Annabelle's spirit was left restless, her pain and betrayal festering within the confines of the doll that had once been her beloved toy. Armed with this knowledge, I collaborated with Ed and Lorraine to perform a ritual designed to help Annabelle's spirit find the closure she so desperately needed. The process was intense, filled with moments of fear and glimpses into the depths of Annabelle's suffering. As we chanted ancient incantations and invoked protective energies, the air around us crackled with supernatural tension. At the climax of the ritual, a blinding light enveloped the room, and the oppressive energy that had plagued Annabelle began to dissipate. The doll's eyes softened, and her expression transformed from one of anguish to peaceful serenity. A gentle breeze swept through the room, carrying with it a sense of calm and release. Annabelle's spirit had finally found the peace she had been denied for so long. The shadows that once haunted the Warrens' museum were lifted, replaced by a tranquil stillness that signified the end of her torment. As the light faded, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and empathy, knowing that we had honored Annabelle's memory and helped her spirit move on. In the weeks that followed, I continued to visit the Warrens' museum, documenting the positive changes and the absence of the malevolent presence that once dominated the space. Annabelle's story became a testament to the power of understanding, compassion, and the importance of giving voice to the voiceless. The experience left an indelible mark on me, reinforcing my belief in the unseen forces that shape our world. It also deepened my respect for the Warrens and their unwavering dedication to helping those trapped between realms. Annabelle's journey from a haunted doll to a peaceful spirit was a poignant reminder that even in the darkest of places, there is hope for redemption and the possibility of healing old wounds. Every time I pass by the Warren Occult Museum, I am reminded of the night I faced Annabelle and the importance of acknowledging the pain and suffering that lingers beyond the veil of death. Her story is not just one of horror but also of resilience and the enduring quest for peace. And as long as there are those willing to listen, the voices of the past will continue to echo, ensuring that no spirit is ever forgotten. In honoring Annabelle's memory, I've come to understand that true horror lies not just in the supernatural, but in the unresolved pain and injustices that persist long after the physical world has moved on. The Annabelle doll stands as a symbol of the enduring human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, there is always a path to light and redemption. As winter blankets the city once more, I often wonder if Annabelle's spirit has found the peace she so desperately sought. The museum remains a place of intrigue and reverence, a sanctuary for those who remember the stories of the past and the lessons they impart. And every time I gaze upon the serene expression of Annabelle, I am reminded that some souls linger not out of malice, but out of a need to be remembered and healed. Story number 4. Amityville House, Shadows of the Damned. I've always been fascinated by places where the veil between the living and the dead feels unervingly thin. The Amityville House in New York has been the subject of countless tales, each more chilling than the last. When I first heard about the DeFeo murders and the subsequent haunting by the Lutz family, my curiosity was instantly piqued. As a freelance writer with a penchant for the paranormal, I knew I had to uncover the truth behind one of America's most infamous haunted houses. In December 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. brutally murdered his entire family in their peaceful suburban home in Amityville. The case sent shockwaves through the community and the nation, not just because of the sheer horror of the act, but also because of the house's dark history that seemed to unfold in the aftermath. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the very same house, only to flee in terror after just 28 days, citing unimaginable supernatural phenomena. Their experiences became the foundation for the book and numerous films that cemented Amityville's place in horror lore. Driven by a mixture of skepticism and intrigue, I decided to visit the Amityville house myself. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and a notebook filled with research, I set out on a chilly autumn morning. The house stood silently on the quiet street, its white facade contrasting starkly with the surrounding suburban homes. As I approached, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, a mix of anticipation and dread. The neighborhood had changed little since the infamous murders. Children played in their yards, oblivious to the dark history that lay just a few houses down. As I walked up the driveway, memories of the Lutz family's accounts echoed in my mind, doors slamming shut on their own, strange odors of decay and rot, cold spots that defied explanation, and the constant feeling of being watched. I entered the house through the front door, which creaked ominously as I pushed it open. The interior was eerily quiet, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories. Dust covered the furniture, and cobwebs adorned the corners of every room. I set up my equipment in what had once been the living room, the epicenter of the Lutz family's terror. As I began my exploration, the house seemed to come alive with subtle movements. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and the wind outside howled, rattling the windows. I made my way through the house, documenting each room meticulously. The kitchen, where Ronald DeFeo Jr. committed his heinous acts, felt particularly oppressive. The lingering sense of violence and pain was palpable. as if the walls themselves held the echoes of screams and bloodshed. I decided to focus my investigation on the basement, the heart of the reported hauntings. According to the Lutzes, this was where the most intense supernatural activity occurred. As I descended the narrow staircase, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the frigid air. The basement was vast, its darkness almost tangible, pressing in on me from all sides. Setting up my camera and recorder, I began to document the space, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant drip of water and the occasional scurrying of unseen creatures. I moved deeper into the basement, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing remnants of old furniture and forgotten belongings. Then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted further, and a thick fog seemed to materialize out of nowhere, enveloping me in its cold embrace. My heart raced as I felt an invisible presence watching me, the oppressive weight of countless souls bearing down on me. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. A sudden noise echoed through the basement, a low, guttural growl that reverberated off the walls. I spun around, flashlight beam darting frantically, but there was nothing there. The growling intensified, morphing into what sounded like muffled voices, whispering unintelligibly. I reached for my voice recorder, desperate to capture the sounds, but the device malfunctioned, its screen flickering erratically before shutting down completely. Panic began to set in as the basement seemed to close in around me. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, moving with a life of their own. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, forming words that sent chills down my spine. "Leave, now," the voices seemed to say, collective plea for me to flee. I turned to ascend the stairs, but my path was blocked by a thick, impenetrable darkness. An invisible force pressed down on me, making it nearly impossible to move. Desperate, I clawed at the shadows, trying to break free, but the force only grew stronger, pulling me deeper into the abyss. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but the darkness was all-consuming. In the midst of my struggle, a figure materialized before me, a translucent apparition of a man, his face twisted in agony. It was Ronald DeFeo Jr., the perpetrator of the murders, his eyes hollow and filled with a sinister intent. He extended a hand towards me, his voice a haunting whisper that echoed in my mind. "Stay, forever." Terrified, I mustered every ounce of courage and broke free from the invisible grip, sprinting up the stairs as fast as I could. The growling and whispers followed me, their intensity growing with each step. I reached the top of the staircase, gasping for breath, and pushed open the basement door, fleeing the house into the cold night air. Once outside, the oppressive weight lifted, replaced by the chilly breeze and the sounds of the night. I leaned against the house, trying to steady my racing heart, knowing that what I had experienced was beyond rational explanation. The Amityville house stood silently behind me, its dark secrets once again concealed within its walls. Determined to understand what I had encountered, I delved deeper into the house's history. I spoke with locals who had known the Lutz family, uncovering stories of inexplicable phenomena that plagued them during their short stay. Strange odors, disembodied voices, objects moving on their own, and the constant feeling of being watched. All of these corroborated the Lutz's terrifying accounts. Further research led me to consult with paranormal experts and historians, piecing together the dark tapestry that was the Amityville house. The house had a history of violence and tragedy long before the DeFeo murders, with reports of previous occupants experiencing similar hauntings and unexplained events. It seemed that the house itself was a magnet for evil, its walls absorbing and amplifying the darkest aspects of human nature. One night, driven by an insatiable need for answers, I returned to the house with a team of paranormal investigators, equipped with advanced equipment and protective measures. We aimed to document and understand the malevolent forces at play. As we entered the house, the air grew thick with tension, the atmosphere charged with an unseen energy. We began our investigation in the living room, where the Lutz family had experienced their most intense hauntings. The room felt colder than the rest of the house, the temperature dropping sharply as we set up our equipment. Suddenly, the air was filled with the sound of heavy breathing and distant screams, the cries of tormented souls trapped within the walls. Moving through the house, we encountered numerous disturbances, objects flying off shelves, doors slamming shut, and ghostly apparitions appearing and disappearing at will. Each room seemed to hold its own horrors, a testament to the house's dark legacy. But it was in the basement that we encountered the true heart of the malevolence. As we approached the spiral staircase, the oppressive energy intensified, the air thick with the scent of decay and death. One of the investigators, Sarah, attempted to communicate with the spirits, her voice trembling as she called out for peace and understanding. The temperature plummeted, and the basement door slammed shut, trapping us inside. Panic set in as the shadows in the basement began to move, forming twisted shapes and ghastly figures that reached out with skeletal hands. The whispers turned into anguished cries, the voices of the past pleading for release. We huddled together, trying to find a way out, but the darkness was relentless, pressing in on us from all sides. Suddenly, a blinding light emanated from the spiral staircase, forcing us to shield our eyes. When the light faded, the oppressive force was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. The basement door creaked open on its own, allowing us to escape into the night. We fled the house, shaken by the intense encounter, knowing that we had only scratched the surface of its dark mysteries. In the aftermath, I reflected on the true nature of the Amityville house. It wasn't just a physical structure. It was a conduit for the darkest aspects of human emotion and violence. The spirits trapped within were not merely ghosts but manifestations of unresolved pain, anger, and suffering that had festered within the walls for decades. Determined to honor the memories of those who had been lost to the house's malevolent influence, I documented our experiences and shared them with the world. The story of the Amityville house serves as a stark reminder of the thin line between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of unresolved trauma and evil. One evening, years after my initial investigation, I received an anonymous package in the mail. Inside was a faded photograph of the Amityville house, the image capturing the darkness that still lingered within its walls. Alongside it was a handwritten note. "Thank you for seeing us. May we finally find peace." I felt a profound sense of closure, knowing that our efforts had made a difference, that perhaps the spirits of the Amityville house were beginning to move on. The house remains abandoned, its walls still holding the echoes of the past. But now it stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring quest for truth and justice. Every time I pass by the Amityville house, I am reminded of the night I faced the shadows of the damned and the importance of giving voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves. The house may still hold its secrets, but through acknowledgement and remembrance, there is hope that even the darkest places can find a path to redemption and peace. In exploring the depths of the Amityville house, I learned that true horror lies not just in the supernatural, but in the unresolved pain and injustices that linger long after the physical world has moved on. The house taught me that every place carries the weight of untold stories, waiting for someone to listen, and in listening to them, we find a deeper connection to our own humanity and the lessons that history imparts. As winter blankets the Amityville neighborhood once more, I often wonder if the spirits have finally found peace. The whispers of the past may still echo softly in the night, but now they serve as a reminder that even in the darkest places, there is hope for healing, remembrance, and the enduring light of understanding to pierce through the gloom. Story number 5. The Black Dahlia, Whispers of the Forgotten. I've always been drawn to the shadows of history, to the stories that linger in the dark corners of our collective memory. The case of Elizabeth Short, known posthumously as the Black Dahlia, has haunted Los Angeles for decades, an unsolved mystery wrapped in brutality and enigma. As a true crime enthusiast and amateur paranormal investigator, I couldn't resist the allure of delving deeper into this chilling tale, hoping to uncover truths that remain buried beneath layers of time and silence. It was a crisp autumn evening in October 2023 when I decided to visit the sites associated with Elizabeth Short's tragic fate. The city of Los Angeles, with its sprawling urban landscape and hidden alleyways, seemed the perfect setting for such an investigation. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and a notebook filled with theories and historical accounts, I set out to walk the paths she once traversed. My first stop was the neighborhood where Elizabeth was last seen alive. The streets, now bustling with modern life, still bore traces of the 1940s architecture and the lingering aura of that fateful night. As I approached a narrow alleyway, the location where her mutilated body was found, a sense of unease settled over me. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the very essence of the tragedy hung heavy in the atmosphere. I set up my equipment, positioning my camera to capture every detail of the desolate alley. The shadows danced ominously under the flickering streetlights, creating an unsettling interplay of light and darkness. I began recording, narrating my thoughts aloud, hoping to capture any anomalies that might explain the lingering mystery. Elizabeth Short, a young aspiring actress with dreams as bright as her name suggested, met a gruesome end here. Her body was found severed at the waist, her face brutally mutilated into what police later described as a Glasgow smile. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the city, and despite numerous investigations, the case remains unsolved to this day. As I spoke, a sudden chill swept through the alley, causing me to shiver involuntarily. My breath became visible in the cold night air, and the distant sounds of the city seemed to fade away, replaced by an eerie silence. I felt a presence, a weight pressing down on me, as if the spirits of the past were watching, waiting. Without warning, a faint whisper echoed through the alley, barely audible over the distant hum of traffic. I froze, straining to hear the words. "Help me?" The voice seemed to murmur, plea lost in the shadows. My heart raced as I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving through the darkness like tendrils of despair. I reached for my voice recorder, hoping to capture the inexplicable sounds. As I pressed play, the device crackled to life, replaying the whispers with unsettling clarity. "Help me?" The voices repeated, a chorus of anguish that sent shivers down my spine. I felt compelled to explore further, to follow the trail of sorrow that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the alley. Venturing deeper into the night, I found myself at the intersection of Old Avenue and Whisper Lane, a location steeped in the lore of the Black Dahlia case. The area was eerily quiet, the buildings standing as silent witnesses to the horrors that had transpired within their walls. I decided to set up camp here, hoping that the stillness of the night would reveal more about the lingering spirits tied to Elizabeth's tragic demise. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped sharply, and the moon cast a pale glow over the deserted streets. I began documenting my findings, noting the unusual drop in temperature and the persistent whispers that seemed to follow me. The air was thick with an intangible sorrow, a collective mourning that transcended time and space. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the darkness, materializing into the unmistakable silhouette of a woman. Her presence was ethereal, her form wavering like smoke in the night breeze. She stood before me, her eyes hollow pools of grief, her expression one of profound sadness and longing. It was Elizabeth Short, her visage a haunting reminder of the beauty and brutality that defined her untimely death. "Why can't you rest?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the symphony of whispers that surrounded us. She extended a hand, her fingers outstretched as if reaching for something just beyond her grasp. I felt an overwhelming sense of empathy, a deep connection to her pain that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. Her presence began to fade, the edges of her form dissolving into the night as the whispers intensified. "Remember us?" Her voice echoed in my mind, a final plea to honor the memories of those lost to violence and injustice. The air around me shimmered with a spectral energy, and I knew that Elizabeth's spirit, along with countless others, yearned for recognition and remembrance, determined to give voice to their silent cries. I delved deeper into the case, uncovering forgotten details and unspoken truths. I spoke with local historians, revisited old crime scenes, and pored over archives in search of answers that had eluded authorities for decades. Each revelation brought me closer to understanding the darkness that had consumed Elizabeth and the unresolved mysteries that still haunted Los Angeles. One night, as I sat in my study surrounded by photographs and notes, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The room seemed to darken, the shadows lengthening as if the spirits from the past had crossed the threshold into my present. The whispers returned, louder and more urgent, weaving through the air like a tapestry of sorrow. "Find the truth," the voices urged, a collective demand that resonated deep within my soul. I knew that my journey was far from over, that the spirits of Elizabeth and others like her depended on me to uncover the truths that had been buried by time and fear. Their stories deserved to be told, their suffering acknowledged, and their memories preserved. Driven by this newfound purpose, I intensified my investigation, following leads that took me to forgotten corners of the city and unearthing secrets that had long been concealed. Each step forward was met with resistance, as if the very fabric of reality was pushing back against my quest for the truth. But I persevered, fueled by the voices that whispered in the shadows, guiding me toward the answers that had remained elusive for so long. One evening, after months of relentless pursuit, I stumbled upon a hidden archive beneath the city's oldest library. The air was thick with dust and the scent of aged paper as I navigated the narrow aisles, searching for the missing pieces of the puzzle. There, amidst stacks of forgotten documents, I found a series of letters written by Elizabeth herself, detailing her struggles, her fears, and the threats she had received before her untimely death. The letters painted a picture of a young woman caught in a web of deceit and corruption, her dreams shattered by forces beyond her control. They hinted at a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of power, a truth so dark and dangerous that it had been buried to protect those involved. As I read her words, I felt a surge of determination, knowing that revealing this hidden history was not just a pursuit of truth, but a mission to honor Elizabeth's memory and the countless others lost to injustice. Armed with this new evidence, I compiled a comprehensive account of the Black Dahlia case, intertwining historical facts with the supernatural encounters that had guided me. The resulting exposé was both a tribute and a revelation, shedding light on the shadows that had long obscured the truth. The response was immediate and profound. People were moved by the depth of the story, and the renewed interest prompted authorities to re-examine the case with fresh eyes. The culmination of my efforts was a documentary that combined historical footage, personal testimonies, and reenactments of my paranormal experiences. It aired on local television, sparking a resurgence of interest in the Black Dahlia case and inspiring a wave of new investigations and theories. The documentary not only reignited the search for justice, but also served as a beacon of remembrance for those whose voices had been silenced. One night, after the documentary aired, I returned to the alleyway where it all began. The air was still, the shadows long and the moon casting a silvery glow over the deserted streets. I stood alone, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, a journey of discovery, empathy, and a relentless pursuit of truth. As I prepared to leave, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the end of the alley. It was Elizabeth, her presence serene and her eyes filled with gratitude. She smiled, a peaceful expression that spoke of closure and release. "Thank you," the whisper echoed in my mind, a final farewell that resonated with the promise of peace. the figure faded into the night, leaving behind a sense of fulfillment and a lingering reminder of the power of remembrance. The Black Dahlia case remains one of America's most enduring mysteries, a haunting tale of beauty, brutality, and the quest for justice. Through my investigation, I've come to understand that some stories transcend the boundaries of time and space, their echoes lingering in the shadows, waiting to be heard. Elizabeth Short's legacy is not just a tale of tragedy, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring need to seek truth and honor the memories of those who can no longer speak for themselves. As I continue to explore the dark corners of history, I carry with me the lessons learned from the Black Dahlia case. The whispers of the past guide me, reminding me that every story deserves to be told, every voice deserves to be heard, and every shadow holds a truth waiting to be unveiled. In honoring Elizabeth's memory, I found a deeper connection to the stories that shape our world and the spirits that linger, seeking recognition and peace. In the quiet moments, when the night is still and the whispers of history echo softly in my mind, I remember Elizabeth Short and the legacy she left behind. Her story is a beacon in the darkness, a reminder that even in the most tragic of circumstances, the truth has a way of resurfacing, guiding us toward understanding, justice, and ultimately, peace.